Both of these battle scenes were submitted to the most prestigious miniature painting competition in the world, Golden Demon, hosted by Games Workshop. But only one of them is a winner. This is the true story of how an artist spent hundreds of hours sculpting and painting, pushing himself to the edge, nearly burning out, and in the end, resulted in controversy and triumph, frustration and wisdom, but not without some hard lessons every hobbyist can learn from. Mini Wargamer Dave here from miniwargaming.com, and today I'm taking you inside some of the most intense Golden Demon projects I've ever seen. Stay tuned until the end, because afterwards I'll share my thoughts on why it's worth the potential pain to submit an entry. This isn't just about paint and miniatures. This is about time, pressure, risk, and the future of competitive miniature painting itself. Sponsored by Wayland Games, but more on that later. Ben, aka Metal AF Miniatures, came into Golden Demon 2024 with not one, not two, but 3 entries. But only one of them really mattered. The first 2 entries? Side projects. The Necromunda Mini, something he started years ago, unfinished, polished up just enough to enter, but never really meant to seriously compete. The second piece, a custom sculpt inspired by John Blanche's classic Realms of Chaos art, originally designed in 75mm scale, but shrunk to a 28mm for Golden Demon. And that shrinkage caused all kinds of fine detail to get lost. Combined with what Ben himself calls subpar painting, it wasn't his strongest work. But then came the main event, the one he cared about the most. And this one was serious. Ben's vision was simple. Capture the feeling of playing Space Hulk 30 years ago. Not just static models, but the raw, cinematic tension we all imagined while rolling dice in dark corridors. And his biggest inspiration? The original Space Hulk box art. 2nd edition. That artwork set the entire tone, from the poses to the color palette. Ben analyzed the color scheme, tweaking it slightly in a triadic palette. He shifted the yellows to greens for stronger contrast against the blood red Terminator armor, and built lighting compositions to frame every model like an action movie still frame. He pulled ideas from video games too. Muzzle flashes as localized lighting, freeze frame blood splashes, shells flying midair. The goal? Suspended violence caught in a split second of mayhem. The exact type of diorama I love to see. And one tiny detail stood out to almost everyone who saw the diorama: the spinning barrel effect. Small, but wildly effective. Ben wanted the flavor of Space Hulk's 3rd edition Terminators, full of character, almost overloaded with purity seals and insignias. But rather than guess from photos, Ben reached out for help. A friend loaned him the models to scan for reference. Then curveball. Games Workshop announced the new Leviathan Terminators mid-project, so Ben pivoted again, designing a hybrid. Leviathan scale with the character of 3rd edition. He restrained the over-the-top details to keep the piece grounded in realism. Next came the Space Hulk environment itself. Ben had to solve one of Space Hulk's biggest visual problems. How do you show off your work inside a dark and narrow corridor? His solution? Create 2 open-ended cylinders at a T-junction, letting natural light flood in while still feeling claustrophobic. Despite starting early, time slipped away. By January, Ben realized he may not finish. The final rush began. 558 hours in total, 200 of which was sculpting, 300 painting, and yes, he tracked it meticulously, app and all. Even after arriving at Adepticon, Ben was still painting. 10 extra hours between Fort Wapple and his hotel room, finishing the final Genestealer just before submitting. Talk about getting it in the nick of time. The piece made it in by Friday afternoon and earned silver in the new diorama dual category. A massive accomplishment. The first time I saw this piece in the glass cabinet at Golden Demon was insane. Like, I stopped, I was looking at the entries, insane. This stood out amongst the sea of other amazing entries, and that's saying a lot because there's a lot of skill and dedication put into every single entry. But this year's competition brought something new: controversy. Now, before we go deeper, I want to pause for a second, because watching Ben build this monster, It's a perfect reminder that projects like this are made possible by the supplies. Sculpting putties, resin, hobby knives, paints, brushes, basing materials. If you're working on your own diorama, big or small, Wayland Games carries pretty much everything Ben used. From Citadel paints to resin kits, hobby tools, glues, even the core miniatures themselves. I dropped a link in the description if you want to stock up for your next project. And it's because I discovered Ben at this time when he submitted his second entry. It caught my eye and I had to know the story behind it. Golden Demon has changed dramatically. Once simple, well-painted stock models dominated. But today, dioramas, conversions, advanced sculpting, artistic compositions, these have taken over. Some hobbyists argue that wargamers, painting stock models straight out of the box, no longer stand a chance. Ben gets it. Unit categories have become mini dioramas. Every single figure, winners often feel like full display pieces. But the truth is, even if Games Workshop restricted entries to stock models on gaming bases, the same elite painters would likely still dominate. The skill gap is real, and in many ways, the rise of elaborate displays has turned Golden Demon into a true spectacle. Ben had said
that 2024 would be my last Golden Demon ever.
At this point in time, he was 70-30 on entering again. But he had one more crazy idea. A Ghazghkull with Snotlings Diarama. Let's go behind the scenes of Ben's most ambitious project to date. A diorama that pushed the boundaries of Games Workshop's IP, challenged Golden Demon's judging standards, and ultimately failed hard. But why it failed? That's where the real story begins. Ben's idea didn't start where it ended. Originally, he wanted to create something different. Something fresh. He was inspired by the old school orcs, the ones with swagger. Picture an orc that looked like it just walked off the set of classic Dune. Big, beefy, full of post-battle confidence. He imagined a scene right after a brutal fight. The war boss chilling, looking at a device, basically an orky iPhone, while a crew of Snotlings polished his armor, and off to the side, another Snotling playing with a Space Marine helmet, hinting at the carnage that just happened. I mean, if I saw this in a cabinet, I would stop immediately. I'd be like, that's fun. I love it. Lots of creativity. Like, it's different, it's unique automatically, and just the humor sells. Like, I just gotta say it. Like, it's when it's fun and funny, like, I'm sold. I don't even care what it is. Like, that's just hilarious to me. So, what an idea. Even just like learning about the idea makes me interested in it. But here's problem number one. Golden Demon was never going to allow it. First, the modern humor. iPhones, sunglasses didn't fit Games Workshop's IP. Second, Golden Demon tends to reward battle scenes, not post-battle downtime. And third, and most important, anything even remotely outside the accepted lore gets scrutinized hard. The entire concept was skating on thin ice. So Ben pivoted. He stripped away the humor and focused on raw, orky chaos. Gone were the jokes. In came Mad Max inspiration, a brutal war scene loaded with motion, Snotlings, and scrap-built madness. It was an homage to Gorka Morka, to the late 90s vibe, but still rooted in the orc aesthetic. Ben approached the sculpting like a man possessed. He started with the orc first, fully sculpting it while still blocking out the rest of the scene. For the Marine, simple conversions were enough. No need to reinvent the wheel. But then the scale disaster hit. Ben didn't own the Ghazghkull model, but he wanted his orc to be just a hair smaller, so he turned to forums for measurements. The consensus? 90 millimeters tall. But what Ben didn't realize was that everyone was including the model's massive claw in the height. The actual head-to-heel height was much less. I mean, what would be your guess for how big Ghazghkull is compared to a Space Marine? What is his scale? Leave it in the comments below. I'm curious to know what you think. He painted the entire oversized orc. A full week of work. Only to realize the model was way too big. Huge setback. But as Ben put it, that first version became a warm-up sketch to the real thing. Then came the base, and with it, the biggest mistake of the whole project. Since the base was too large for Ben's printer, he outsourced it. But when scaling the 3D file, he accidentally used the original incorrect measurements based on the oversized orc. When the print arrived, it was comically massive, too big, too costly. Worst of all, he had to redo the entire thing. Another huge delay. At this point, it would have been understandable if he just pulled the plug on the entire thing. But he didn't. And finally, with the correct scale locked in, Ben moved forward. He experimented with motion blur effects inspired by Johan Zelenin. Thick oil paint dragging techniques to simulate movement. Unfortunately, the oils didn't cooperate, and Ben returned to acrylics for a cleaner result. At this stage, the diorama looked great. Ben was feeling confident. But the real test was still ahead. Golden Demon judging works like this. First, your piece has to qualify for finalists. If it doesn't, you're not even in the running. No quota, no guarantees. The judges make cuts long before medals are awarded. Ben's diorama got commended. That's the polite way of saying, good work, but you're not advancing. So why? Why did this piece fail to break through? It's not technique. Ben's a Golden Demon winner. It's not ambition, nor is it creativity. The likely reason? Intellectual property. Ben's orc didn't resemble Games Workshop's orcs closely enough. Even though he used orky design language, tusks, armor plates, the whole vibe, it wasn't instantly recognizable as their orc. And this isn't the first time IP shadow banning happened. Just ask Ben Comets, whose masterfully painted Ratling tank was blocked because it strayed too far from GW's depiction of Ratlings. Even Slayer sword contenders aren't immune. However, Ben wasn't blindsided. He saw the risk. In fact, in his very first planning notes for the project, he literally wrote, "This piece is risky. Judges may shadow disqualify it." He gambled and he lost. But here's the thing. He doesn't regret it, because the piece itself was still a creative success. Ben pioneered new techniques, blending 3D sculpting, painting, and even experimenting with 2.5D relief to simulate depth. He captured chaos in a way few others have, and that by itself is a victory. So here's my takeaway on this whole thing, with the caveat of, listen guys, I personally have never entered a Golden Demon, so I should be the last person that you need to listen to when it comes to giving advice for entering in the first place. But what I do have is 18 years of looking at thousands of miniatures. Everything from my own collection to collections of other wargamers and painters along the way. I would say a reward for entering a painting competition is the exposure of the piece itself. Whether an award is applied to it, if people look at it, if there are thousands of eyes on it, if they inspire more creativity in the realm in which it's represented, I see that as a massive victory. And if not winning the competition pushes you for the following year to improve upon your skills, that as well is a victory. I'm Mini Wargamer Dave, and this has been a presentation of Metal AF Miniatures Golden Demon entries.